Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak on this 21st day of September 2020, and it's now 22 minutes to 7 o'clock. And I want us to begin with the discussion about the revenue standoff that was, and now the senators have resolved, and now want us to, we'll be speaking to Senator Ledamo Lekina from Narok County, Senator Kimano Matangi from Kiambu County, and Mheshimiwa Kimani Ichung'wah from Kikuyu constituency in Kiambu County. We'll also be speaking to Senator Samson Cherargei as soon as he joins us. But I want us to begin by listening to what the senators said on the afternoon of that very important day last week when they were able to reach a deal.
The protracted process that we took has been able to bring on the table of our counties an additional 53.5 billion. So it has not been in vain, Mr. Speaker. It has borne fruit.
The mood of the House is that we dispense and dispatch money to counties so that the Council of Gangsters do not continue with their gangsterism.
Abstentions 0, nays 0, ayes 41. The ayes have it.
I'm so happy that the so-called Inturi formula that had proposed Murang'a to lose 15 million is gone. Other formulas that were oppressive to Murang'a or even the so-called big counties are gone.
I'm happy that the shutting down of counties now is over and the stalemate is over. So we expect counties to be up and running and ensure that we move forward and ensure devolution works.
We stood firm against marginalization and against disenfranchisement of the part of the country.
We have achieved what we've been fighting for. We have been fighting for a win-win formula, and let it be known that today the Senate has passed a win-win formula.
Let's call it a win-win formula of, well, partly some of them. But Senator Ledamo Lekina, good morning. And of course, this has been a long time coming, and it appears that everyone appears happy. What do you make of the process that was?
It was a process filled with egos, where, you know, it depended, actually the whole process depended on who brought the proposed formula. You know, if you think about it, it is back to the Y equal A plus B, which we proposed with Sakaja and Mutula. And one thing that makes me very happy is that, at least for the next 5 years, because I do not believe that with the current economic position of this country, which seems to be on a downtrend, we'll be able to raise an additional 53 billion shillings. And I'm very happy that my good friend Ichung'wah is actually here today, because him and I served in the last mediation committee on DORA. And we discussed about the issue of additional revenue, and there was no money. That time we were actually being very, very honest with each other. But the way things were going, they had to come up with a conniving way of helping us pass the division of the revenue formula. But I can be very honest and very straight that for the next 5 years there'll be not a single penny added into the cut. Zero.
Right. Counties
will continue getting what they have received last year. That will be the norm for the next 5 years. And I can bet you $1 million bob.
So you believe that even next year the allocation will be 316.5 billion shillings and not the 370 that were being promised about?
Yes, I do. I believe that.
So why were we so excited to pass a formula that would appear to allocate more funds?
Because that formula will not take a penny away from Narok, neither will it take a penny away from Turkana, neither will it take away a penny from Mombasa, and all the counties, the 18 counties which were losing, you know. So I can bet you, and I'm willing to pay this, I will bet you $1 million bob. I'll sell all my cows to pay you. We will not gain any shilling in the next 4 years. No way.
Senator Matangi, do you feel so? I know you want to respond with your first reaction to now the passage of the new formula, but is it true that what you are treated to of 53.5 billion shillings is just, let me just say for lack of a better word, hot air?
Well, I absolutely don't believe so, Sam, and I'll tell you why. First, the passing of that formula had many aspects that needed to be corrected first, and once they are corrected, then you can start talking about the right or correct way of doing things. The first thing that was supposed to be corrected was that in the second generation formula, the data that was being used to calculate how much, whatever parameters or percentages were applied, the data was wrong. It was based on the population census of 2009, which, as you remember, some was heavily disputed and actually evidenced by government records, which are existent for any public officer to see, or any member of the public to see. That is, for example, if you look at some of the counties, the population they had registered in 2009 and which actually went into government data. And some of the importance of this is this, that when data is entered and owned by government as its own data, that is the data that's used to come up with projections which also determine how all monies are shared. So the first thing was to correct that wrong. I believe that was a major win, because moving forward from now, the data that is going to be used for any formula, and that for that matter, that is the current formula, will be the current authenticated data that shows the true and correct number of people in every region, in every country. Number two, is that government collected new data also on poverty. Remember, when we were using the second generation formula, poverty was deemed to have been a county fare, or rather, the county was the denominator of poverty, such that you're able to say that you'd say that Kiambu is a poor county, or Tana River is a poor county. Now that has now been done away with by the approach and the data is collected in 2015-2016, and which is now a component of the current formula, such that now poverty is adjudged by areas, regions within communities, not necessarily a county. That means, for example, in the calculations for poverty, counties like Murang'a will be included. Counties like Kiambu, in the areas of Ndeya, where my constituent and colleague Kimani Ichung'wah comes from. Okay. And so those were major wins. But then moving forward, I want to respond just very quickly to what Senator Ledamo Olekina is saying. You see, it does not necessarily mean when government has made a commitment to, for example, increase the 53 billion, that they have got to go and necessarily collect more taxes. Remember, part of what needs to be corrected in the existing system, for that matter, and expenditure of government is wastage. Okay. Number two is corruption. So there are several areas in government where, with determination, with decision, with application of that truth, that there's a commitment to 3 billion. That money is available.
But Senator Matangi, wastage and corruption cuts across both levels of government, but we'll get back to that. But first, Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah, good morning. And of course, you once chaired a very important committee, the Budget and Appropriations. I'm not saying that you now don't belong to an important committee, but you would know, in terms of the revenue targets that we have and the actual collection that we eventually receive, do you think there's a possibility that we can have 53.5 billion extra to allocate to the counties with the challenges that we face today of COVID-19 pandemic?
Morning, Gituku and the two senators. And let me first begin by saying that if they are both happy and everybody is happy, then the country is happy and it's a good thing. To a win-win formula or a situation where everybody walks out happy and feels that they're winners is what we should have gotten. And for me, Gituku, from the beginning, I said we just got the country involved in a very unfortunate situation, and for me it was a epitomization of a failed leadership for us to have taken the country through such a process. Because if we finally got to where we got to, why didn't we do it earlier? And I do hope that the situation will never have to recur, that leadership in the country would always come in earlier to resolve some of these things, because the country was being taken down a very dangerous road, and you'll agree with me, and the two senators may agree with me, that we are getting on the verge of dividing the country along very dangerous even ethnic lines as a result of that formula. And therefore, the resolution of that formula is a good thing for the country, and having a win-win situation for everybody is what we ought to have done from the word go, not having very intransigent positions that are not helpful to anyone. Two, on the question of revenues, Gituku, I think I don't need to answer you. That question has already been answered by the Cabinet Secretary and the revisions we've seen in our revenue targets for this particular year by almost close to 100 billion shillings. That, in a way, vindicates what Senator Ledama is saying, that it will be difficult. I don't want to bet $1 million shillings. I don't have $1 million shillings. I don't have cows like Ledama. But I can tell you it will be a difficult thing to do, considering where the economy is currently as a result of this COVID pandemic. And even before the COVID pandemic, this economy was not doing very well. It is not that we took hardline positions when we got into a stalemate last year, but 2018, 2019, you remember, we had a mediation process where we served with Senator Ledama that took us all the way to almost the end of October before we finally agreed. And Ledama will tell you it was not easy. And I can tell you, having to sit and negotiate with Ledama, Senator Mutula Kilonzo, Senator Sakaja was not an easy thing. I think it's one of the most difficult mediation processes that I've ever sat in. Mm-hmm. And it's because, understandably, they all wanted more money going to the counties.
Right.
And the money wasn't available. So we just need to ask ourselves, what is it that is changing this economy? Unless we are saying it has been government or the executive not being able to, or willing to give more money to the counties. And people have to take the kind of intransigent position that they took in the Senate for the National Treasury and for the executive to be able to avail more money to the counties. And I'll tell you, more money going to the counties, despite the issues Senator Matangi is mentioning to do with accountability and how this money is utilized by the county governments and the governors in the counties, is a good thing, because it's money going back to our grassroots. It's money going to bring about development. But I also tell you, Gituku, for me, the whole debate on revenue share, as I said, I looked at it as the epitomization of failed leadership. It is not a debate we ought to have gotten into in the first place. And I do hope that in future we will never have to go through this position. I agree with Senator Matangi when he says CRA's position, work is not done, and it's really not done, and that's why this formula is reviewed every 3 years. But the fact that we are talking about less than 20% of our revenue share, we are not discussing our 80% share of revenue and where that money goes, Gituku. That to me becomes a failure in our leadership. We must also get to a position where we start discussing the spatial distribution of our development expenditure at the national government level, or the larger percentage of resources that are left at the national government. Where does this money end up to?
Okay, all right.
In what regions? Because if we want to develop a country, Gituku, and that's why I said it's the epitomization of failed leadership, you must develop the country equitably and fairly across the country. When we take our
before you carry on, Honorable Ishongwa, allow me to
of all our arguments and
allow me to disrupt you so that something I want us to take a look at. That is the formula that was passed by the Senate versus what had been proposed by the Commission on Revenue Allocation, so that we get to understand what it really talks about, the parameters that are to be considered in allocating the funds. Do you have the formula? Right. If you look at the population parameter, it had been proposed by CRA to take up to 18%. The Senate approved 18%. Health was to take 17%. The Senate approved 17%. Agriculture was to take 10%. It has taken 10% according to the Senate. Urban services 5%. The Senate passed 5%. The roads, CRA had proposed 4%, but the Senate changed that to 8%. Let's take a look at the other parameters to see what else was affected. And it will show you that there's another parameter by the name poverty index. The CRA had proposed 14%. The Senate reached 14%. Land area 8%. 8% approved by the Senate. Basic share 20%, and that is what was approved. Then there was fiscal effort proposed by the CRA at 2%, and fiscal prudence proposed by CRA at 2%. That was scrapped and moved to the share to do with the roads. And Senator Ledama Olekina, very quickly. So if you look at these parameters, they appear, the formula is not very different from what CRA proposed, and that report, they filed it with you, I believe, in April 2019. Then a Kenyan wonders, why did it have to take this long for you to argue for so long, yet arrive at almost the same formula as proposed by CRA?
Committees.
Now, let me just put it this way. One, I first of all must congratulate CRA for having really developed those parameters. We've got officers like Lynette Uyugi, who is an amazing, really technocrat. We've got Jane, I think Kiara, who is Kiringai, who is the chairperson. And if you look at it, actually CRA did win. The only thing that we changed was that we took the fiscal effort parameter. Fiscal effort rewards counties like Narok, which really generates a lot of on-source revenue. And then fiscal prudence rewards counties that have got issues to do with, like let's say if there's an audit committee, they have it in place. If they have a budget committee, they have it in place. If they have an internal audit mechanism, they have it in place. If they receive things like unqualified or qualified opinion, and really punishes counties that gets disclaimers and adverse opinion. So really what we did, we looked at those parameters. And when we ran all different simulations, you could tell that when you cap land at 7%, you put it at 8%, but you cap it at 7%. So that counties like Marsabit do not end up taking all the money. Then you take that into roads. That does not help a county like Nairobi, but it helps counties like Narok, it helps counties like Turkana, Marsabit, where a county loses, like in the sense that you've capped the land at 7%, that county gains because you've taken the 2% and 2 other percent to the roads parameter. The roads parameter is not really for urban areas. It is for rural areas. It is rural access roads, because remember we have the Kenya Urban Roads, which supports all the urban areas. So really, CRA did win in this formula. The only thing that we did was really just to tweak and take and freeze, or rather do away with the fiscal effort parameter, because that rewards and also punishes counties. Like in the sense of like this year when COVID-19, Narok would have lost 903 million.
And Senator Ledama, that took you 17 months.
Say that again?
That took you 17 months.
I'll tell you why it took 17 months. And I want to be very candid here. It was an issue of egos, because one political line was seeing as if it's the other political line which is coming up with a win-win position. So really, the committee came up with a very, very unfavorable formula where they introduced a 5% land and with a square root. So you take a land like Narok, which is around 17,000 square kilometers, and you reduce it into a square root of 143. That was the biggest problem. So we had to fight that. Okay. We also had the debate on per capita. People who are arguing that people in Kiambu were getting less money than people in Lamu. But if you look at it, you are not comparing apple to apple. In Lamu, there are only 102,000 people. In Kiambu, there are over 2.5 million people. So really, there's no way you can say, okay, the same amount of money that people in Lamu get, the people in Kiambu get.
Okay.
So really,
all right. Senator Ledama, let's listen to what, because this conversation has really split yourselves and the governors, the Council of Governors, because of the difficulties that were during the debate on that formula. Let's listen to what Governor Oparanya spoke about.
Please don't put him.
The senators just sometime last week.
The Senate has just woken up from their slumber, that they have had this formula for the last 2 years. They knew about the formula 3 years ago. Yet they have continuously treated the country to theatrics.
The chair of COG overplaying himself with authority he doesn't have.
He cannot shut down any county. He is not in charge of any other counties. The county of Mandera, where my governor Roba is independent of Kakamega.
Oparanya anaweza kusitisha huduma katika kaunti ya Kakamega, lakini zile 46 nyingine zote wapuuze amri ya Oparanya, kwa sababu amri ile haina mamlaka yote ya kisheria.
We miss Isaac Ruto. Madam Speaker, we miss Peter Munya. Madam Speaker, we even miss Governor Nanok. But Governor Oparanya is the most colorless of all.
Someone is trying to blackmail the Senate. Somebody wants the Senate to look bad, that it is us who have starved counties of cash. Don't fall victims into this silly trap and begin to blame Governor Oparanya. Governor Oparanya is just an errand boy.
When I speak on behalf of the Council of Governors, I must get a mandate from the entire council.
It is now 3 months. We can no longer pretend that the center is holding. Things have fallen apart and the center cannot hold. The Wananchi should know it from us that the responsibility lies squarely in the hands of the Senate.
Senator Wamatangi, when you listen to your colleagues speak there, and of course Governor Oparanya speak there, it appears a blame game. And we have been hearing the senators say that the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary can go ahead and release up to 50% of funds, but himself says that he has to get back to Parliament for approval. Why are we having this back and forth, yet you know the interest of the country where they are 3 months into the financial year?
Sam, I think first the discussion about what Oparanya said and his colleagues by now is water under the bridge. That Rubicon we've already passed because already we have a formula. But just so that we address the future, I think some of the things that Governor Oparanya was saying are very unhelpful. Unhelpful because as we said very loudly during the discussion, indeed it is the Council of Governors that let the Senate down. The Senate's proposal from the word go as to how much money should have been put in DORA was 356 billion. But the Council of Governors went during their discussion in the summit. They decided that they will agree with the executive then that 316 billion was enough. And that is how, despite having already projected with the proposed formula then by CRA, that 356 billion was going to give us a position whereby, one, it would have been progressive, there would have been no losers at the threshold, and number three, then that all the other additives, and maybe I believe some will be getting to some of those details later, as to how does this current formula differ from the second generation. But there are very useful gains that even the Council of Governors and governors, independently, will be getting from the passage of that formula. So they let the Senate down. All these other things that they said, including shutting down counties and stopping, for example, offering of health services and sending workers home. I think it was largely theatrical. I think it was just intended to attract attention to themselves, for that matter. And maybe they were trying to escape the responsibility they had in upholding, as per the Constitution requires. Indeed, in passing the resolution, the Senate, as per Article 217 of the Constitution, is required to consult with the Council of Governors. And that had been done by the Committee on Finance and Budget of the Senate. They had been invited. And there was that discussion already for them to have gone then and changed their position. But let me just put it this way, that now looking forward, what the governors should do and embark on immediately is to ensure that with this new disaggregated approach to the formula, and if you give us an opportunity, we'll be able to explain that a little bit, because earlier, we had lump sum bulk disbursement, for example, in population 45%, in poverty this amount, land mass so much. But in this formula, it has been disaggregated within the spirit and call of the Constitution that resources follow functions. That's why you find that there's an allocation to agriculture specifically. That's why you find that there's an allocation to roads. There is an allocation to health services. There is an allocation to urban services to ensure that now at the county government level, you can quantify. Once a county, for example, like Kiambu receives its 12 billion, you should be able to follow and say, out of this 12 billion, how much has been sent for agriculture? How much has been sent for this? And then lastly, Sam, let me just for the sake of cleaning the record of what we said this morning, I want to very clearly say that there is utterly, absolutely no difficulty in the government of the day, even tomorrow, raising 53 billion to give to counties. The Constitution requires that the amount that is devolved to counties should be not less than 15% of all revenues collected by national government. Now, in the last year, national government collected almost 1.6 trillion collections in revenue. Now, if you look at what government has currently said that they are devolving about 30% of their collected revenue. What is 30% of 1.6 trillion? It is way beyond 500 billion. And so this 53 billion is available indeed if Parliament was to play its part. The Constitution requires that Parliament passes the audited accounts of national government every year. Now, these projections that we're talking about are based on the audit reports as filed by the National Assembly in the year 2015. So supposing a Parliament had done its work and ensured that the budget we're talking about right now, or the audited accounts we're talking about right now, are for that of the year 2018-2019.
Okay.
We would be talking about over 500 billion going to counties, and that would be lawful. That should be the position of the Constitution. And so
all right, Senator.
I absolutely find it not only plausible, but responsible for national government to ensure that that amount that has been promised goes, whether the revenue drops by 10%, 15%, whether it increases by 20%. And if we move on, and I don't want to take too much time because I know my other colleagues may want to say something, but if you give us an opportunity, I can be able to demonstrate that it is possible for government to raise that revenue, even in these circumstances. What you just need to do is to apply what they've been saying all the way along about austerity, about redirection of funds, about reallocation, about a relook at expenditure. That's what you need to do. I mean, tough times call for tough measures.
All right, Senator.
Like this, you cannot continue to behave.
Allow me to cut you short because I need to bring in your colleague, fellow constituent, that is Kimani Ichung'wah, because I'm looking at what you're saying, and it would appear that the 53.5 billion shillings is more of a gentleman's agreement than law, because revenue can only be shared according to DORA that will be passed sometime next year. So I don't know what happens with that. But Honorable Ichung'wah, as you reflect on that, what does it say about, yes, I know that you're saying it's a failed leadership, but what should governors do at a situation that they have tried all avenues, they've not been successful, they don't have resources, and they cannot manage to afford the service delivery in the counties? What are they supposed to do, despite the questioning by senators who are saying that they were just trying to attract attention?
I think to a large extent, Kituko would agree with the number of senators that the current leadership of the Council of Governors has indeed failed counties and county governments in regard to fighting for additional resources coming to their own counties. However, we must also appreciate, and I think Senator Ladama will agree with me, since we have sat in a committee with him and looked at the numbers. What Senator Matangi is saying is very simplistic. So simplistic that it can only hold water on a TV political debate and not in terms of numbers. If you look at, for instance, this financial year, 2021, and the numbers that we are looking at, we are talking about 316 billion going to counties. We are talking of revenues revised, or to be revised now, to 1.5 trillion shillings, what is collectible. Even last year, we were not able to get to the 1.6 that we are talking about, because remember, the division of revenue bill is done based on projected revenues, not actual revenues. Maybe that's something we may also need to look at in the future. Therefore, if you look at 1.6 or even 1.5 trillion, Gituku, about close to 1 trillion shillings this year will go to repayment of public debt. To be precise, about 901 billion shillings. That leaves you with about 500 to 600 billion shillings to share between counties, pay your salaries, and pay all other consolidated fund services, including pensions and other statutory payments that you have to pay ahead of even sharing to counties. Therefore, when we say that we are in a very difficult situation, it may not be that easy. If we were to take that simplistic view that Senator Matangi is taking, then it would mean, and everything has a price to pay, that we have to borrow more money to be able to give to counties, to even pay for their salaries, and even before you talk about the share of national government development budget. Therefore, it is more difficult than the simplistic approach that Senator Matangi wants us to take and argue that there is money readily available. And true, unless you are saying that there hasn't been political will then in this government to devolve more money to the counties. And I'll tell you, the will might be there, but the center might not have the money to devolve. And if you devolve more, it means then something has to give in at the national government level, or you have to go and borrow more money to be able to devolve more money, more resources to the counties. Therefore, it's always a process of give and take. It's a process where we have got to balance between our other national obligations like debt repayment, having to settle salaries and wages and pensions for national government and also county government officers.
Right.
Even before we talk about what then needs to be shared out between the counties. And therefore,
so
that's why
is it a possibility?
For me,
is it a possibility that then come financial year 2021, 2022, the amount of money sent to the counties might actually be less than 316.5 billion shillings, even with the new formula?
Well, depending on how the economy performs and how quickly we're able to recover from this pandemic and its effects on the economy, Gituko, and that's what I was telling you yesterday when you called me. I wish we would have a discussion on what our national priorities today. I did a request through the Speaker of the National Assembly when we reopened the Assembly this session, that probably it's time the President comes to address the nation on the state of the nation and tell us how is he redirecting his priorities towards recovery of our economy vis-a-vis all the other things that we are talking about. Because if we do not focus on economic recovery, Gituku, it is possible. It is a possibility that we may have to devolve less than 316.5 billion that we have devolved this year. But maybe we could probably add it to 325 or the 335 that the Senate were looking for this year. But we, as I said, there has to be, something has to give in.
Okay.
Either we borrow more, or we sacrifice a little bit of our development expenditure at the national government level, because if you listen to what Senator Matangi was telling you, austerity measures. Look at the austerity measures that have been proposed in the past. We propose austerity measures in the run-up to a supplementary budget. And I can guarantee you maybe in the next 2 or 3 weeks, there will be a supplementary budget, the first supplementary budget coming in for this financial year. But the austerity measures that are always announced are more of talk than action. And I see this going on and on and on and on because we really not always very serious about the things that we say and the things that we do. We talk about austerity in government, but that austerity is never seen in reality. Therefore, if you were to get money from austerity measures, then it would have to be serious, huge cuts. And this year, Gituko, I can tell you, at least up to the end of June for the last financial year, the austerity measures that were taken, and even to a large extent, we began austerity measures at the beginning of this financial year by considering that the effects of COVID on things like maybe travel for both all the 3 level arms of government would not be as much as it were in the previous year and the year before. And therefore, you find that the space maybe to have austerity measures on a budget line like travel may be very limited, because we at the time we were doing the budget, we were agreed that logically, because of COVID-19, people will not be able to travel. I can tell you something like the legislature, parliament, and I think to a large extent the judiciary and also the executive, travel was left at about 25% of what was there in the previous year. Therefore, if you're talking about austerity measures, what's our play area to be able to have further cuts? If you're to cut, unfortunately, you may have to cut on development expenditure, unless, again, you're talking about the very painful and politically incorrect things to do, like laying off of staff. And I don't think it would be a very popular or good thing to do now, in light of the pandemic that has rendered a lot of people jobless, many more in businesses that have collapsed. Then if you are to talk about restructuring government wages and salaries in terms of being able to restructure their wage bill, then it may be a very painful and expensive political price to pay.
All right,
I don't know if we have the guts to do it.
Right. Honorable Shong, I hear you. We need to take a short break here.
Just before we take a short break, just allow me to...
Yes, quickly.
Just quickly. I think I agree entirely with my good friend Ichungwa, because you remember he sat in the budget committee. And back in February of 2020, the budget policy statement had sort of like approved about 325 billion to be sent to counties. Now, as money that can be sent to counties, if you look at the budget outlook paper, which was revised, prepared by cabinet and approved by prepared by Treasury and approved by cabinet for this September, it has revised that figure down to 319 billion. And now what that budget outlook paper is saying is that our growth, economic growth, will shrink down to 2.6% in 2020 from the 5.4% registered in 2019. So with all those figures, these are facts.
Right.
There's no way we can be able to say that the country is going to raise more revenue in the next financial year. Where is that money going to come from? And in fact, when you look at it, what Treasury is projecting is that there'll be about 411 billion, which will have to be funded externally, you know? And then I think the other figure is about 50 billion from borrowed locally. So when you're looking at it, we are borrowing more, you know, so we cannot be saying we want to borrow more to be able to even to fund paying salaries.
Which is a bit expensive.
We have to be very pragmatic in terms of our approach on the economic outlook.
Okay, all right. We want to take a break here. When you come back, you're still with Senator Olekina, Honorable Ishongwa, and Senator Matangi. We'll be talking about the state of politics in the country, including the narrative that is now forming of the hustler nation versus what is not the hustler nation after the break.